So this video is about the test for calcium ions, that's Ca2+. So let's have a look at the experiment first today. So the first thing that I've got is a solution that contains some calcium 2+ ions, and to this I'm going to add some sodium hydroxide. So what you can see when we add the sodium hydroxide is that you get this nice white precipitate, and that white precipitate tells me that calcium is present. If I add lots more of it, if I add sodium hydroxide in excess, the precipitate doesn't disappear, okay? You can see it's still building up. So it's insoluble in excess. You will always have the white precipitate present. Now, if I test calcium 2+ ions, a different sample now, with ammonia, then you get something slightly different. So with the ammonia, calcium, you can see, kind of almost gives like no precipitate or a very, very light white precipitate, but you don't really see a lot. It's definitely not as white as the calcium with the sodium hydroxide that we had 2 seconds ago. So let's check out the equations to represent both of the reactions that are happening here. So it's equation time. The Ca2+ with the NaOH is really reacting with the hydroxide ions. So really you have the Ca2+ reacting with the OH-. The precipitate that's formed is calcium hydroxide, and that's your white precipitate that's insoluble in excess. You can show it's a precipitate because it's got the solid state symbol here. Precipitate, remember, just means a solid product. Now, when the calcium 2+ reacts with the ammonia, remember that we saw that you don't really get a precipitate formed. Now, even though the ammonia does form a few hydroxide ions, it doesn't form enough hydroxide ions to make this reaction happen, and so therefore we say that there's no real precipitate formed from that reaction. That is it for how you test for calcium 2+ ions. You get an insoluble white precipitate when you react it with sodium hydroxide, and pretty much no precipitate when you react it with ammonia.